Hello everyone, my name's Kevin. I'm the developer of the Impact Interaction System, and this video is going to be a kind of getting started guide on how to use Impact. And I'm going to be going through an example of setting up interactions for physics-based interactions. So what I have set up here is just a simple character controller that can pick up objects, and what I want to do is have this object here play some sounds when it interacts with the terrain and the level and all that kind of good stuff. So let's go and get started. So the first thing that we need to do to set up Impact is create an Impact tag library. This is an asset, so we go to Create, Impact, and Impact tag library. And what an Impact tag library is it's basically just a collection of tag names that the system uses to determine what interactions to play. These tags can be really anything you want. They can be simple material types like hard and soft. You can be more granular with the material types like metal, carpet, plastic, wood, concrete, all that kind of stuff. And you can also define tags for things that are more like events, so like footsteps or weapon impacts, that kind of stuff. You can have up to 32 tags defined. The reason for 32 is because internally tags are stored as an integer bit mask, so you're limited by the 32-bit integer. And so for my purposes, I'm just going to define 2 here. I'm going to go with hard and soft. And that's all the setup I need to do for Impact Tag Library. So the next thing that we need to do is create some Impact materials, since Impact is a material-based interaction system. We're going to be creating 3 materials. We need 1 material for this dark gray texture here and these dark gray blocks. That's going to be our hard material. We're going to need a material for the green areas here and these green blocks. That's going to be our soft material. And we need a 3rd material for the plastic container itself. So to create an Impact material, we go to Create, Impact, and Impact Material. I'm going to start off with creating the hard material. And the first thing that you're probably going to want to do when you create a new material is drag and drop the Impact tag library into the tag library field. This just makes it so that you'll actually see the names of the tags instead of seeing the raw integer values. So we drop that in there, and now we got a nice little drop down. The material tags field just describes what tags apply to this material. So you can select multiple of these if you want, but in this case, I just want to select hard. Now we duplicate that to create the soft material. So now I uncheck hard and check soft. And finally, I'm going to create the plastic material. And plastic is going to be a hard material. So now that we've got our materials set up, we're going to need to create some interactions for them to use. So I'm going to start off by creating what's called interaction sets on the material by clicking New. And an interaction set is basically just a set of interactions that are triggered whenever these include tags and exclude tag filters are met. So in my case, I'm going to want an interaction set for when we interact with hard materials. And this is the plastic container interacting with these dark gray areas here. So we have include tags, which we want to set to hard. This just means that whenever we interact with something that has the hard tag on it, these interactions that we're going to define here will be used. The exact checkbox means that any object we interact with has to exactly have these tags defined. So for example, if there was an interaction with an object that had both the hard and soft tags checked, and we had exact checked, then this interaction set would not be used. But in my case, I'm just going to uncheck that. Exclude tags. If any of these are defined, anything that has one of these tags defined, so for example, if we check soft, anything that has the soft tag will be ignored for this interaction set and it won't be used. And it has the same exact checkbox here. In my case, I'm just going to set. I'm also going to go ahead and create the interaction set for soft material types. So to create that, call it soft, set the include tags to soft. And finally, for interaction sets, we have this fallback tags option, which basically means if for whatever reason we're interacting with an object that we weren't able to get the tags from it, these will be the tags that are used instead as kind of a fallback. So if we set it to nothing, then nothing will happen if we interact with an object that we don't know the tags for. It's kind of like a default. So I'm going to set my default to be hard. And now we get into the real meat of the impact interaction system, which are the interactions themselves. As you can see here, these interaction sets have a list of interactions that we can add to, but it just creates a blank interaction because the interactions themselves are assets. So what I want to do here is, for this plastic container, I just want to play some sounds when it's interacting with the world. And to do that, I'm going to be using an audio interaction. And to create an audio interaction, I go to Create, Impact, and click on Audio Interaction. And this is going to be my sounds for when it hits hard materials. So I'm just going to call it hard, caps lock, hard audio interaction. And what I can do here, I have a bunch of different properties here. I have the collision audio clips, which are used for when the object collides with a material, just single event collisions. I have the slide and roll audio, which are audio clips used for sliding and rolling. And I've got the audio source template that it's going to take the audio source properties from. So I'm going to go ahead and assign the collision audio clips. I've got some sounds already here. These are from the impact demo. I've got some various hard and soft impact sounds and hard, slide, soft. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take and drag these hard impact sounds into the collision audio clips. And you'll see that there's this property called audio clip selection mode, which is now set to velocity. It also has the random option. What velocity does is it takes the collision velocity and uses that to kind of scale the audio clips. So for example, the audio clip in position 1 would be for very soft impacts, and the audio clip in position 5 would be for hard impacts. And you can kind of hear that in the audio clips themselves. So this is a soft impact, and this is a harder impact. So I'm going to keep it as velocity for now, but you can also set to random, so it just will randomly choose from the audio clips. For the slide audio, I'm going to choose the slide sound effect, and I don't have any roll audio, so I'm going to leave that blank. For the audio source template, I have a prefab already set up here, and all it has is just an audio source on it with the properties that I want already set up. So I'm going to go back to my audio interaction, drag and drop the audio source, and that's all of my audio clips and audio sources set up. And we have we have a few other properties here. We have velocity range, which defines the range at which velocities are compared to when we're colliding. So we have 2 meters per second and 9 meters per second is kind of our velocity range. Any collision less than 2 with a magnitude of less than 2 will not play any sounds. And from 2 all the way to 9, the intensity of the collision will be scaled up until it reaches 9, at which point that's kind of the maximum. The collision normal influence is how much the normal of the collision affects the intensity of the collision. So for example, if this is all the way set to 1, that means that grazing collisions won't have as high of a volume as direct collisions. If we set this to 0, that means that regardless of the normal, it will just come straight from the velocity, so you may end up with some really loud collisions on grazing impacts. So I typically like to set this all the way to 1. Scale volume with velocity just means that the output volume will be scaled with the velocity based on this velocity range. So right now it's just a linear curve, but you can set that to whatever you like. The pitch randomness is just a multiplier for the pitch. it multiplies based off of the initial pitch of the audio source template. And the volume randomness is the same thing, just for volume. And the slide velocity pitch modifier is a value for increasing the pitch of the sliding and rolling effect based on the velocity of the object as it's sliding or rolling. So yeah, I'm just going to leave all these as the default for me. And that's all we have to do to set up the audio interaction. And for the soft impact sounds, I'm just going to do the exact same thing. I'm going to create a new impact audio interaction, and then just call it soft audio interaction. Go back to my sounds, get all of the soft audio clips, and the slide soft. Use the same audio source prefab, and we're good to go on that one. So now we need to actually set up the interactions to be used in our material. So if we go back to our plastic material, let's expand hard and soft, we can drag these interactions into the hard interaction set and drag the soft interaction into the soft interaction set. And now our material is all ready to go. So now that we've got our material set up, we need to actually set up our objects to use the materials. So we're going to start off with setting up our little plastic container here to use the materials. And the first component we're going to want to add to this is an impact object. And an impact object basically just defines what material an object uses. So to do that, we're going to go to Add Component, go to Impact, and we're going to choose Impact Object Rigid Body since our object has a rigid body on it. And here we got two fields, one for the material, so we can just drag our plastic material onto there. And the second one, priority, basically just means how important this object is. Impact uses object pooling for all of its different effects, for its audio effects and particle decal effects. And having a higher priority just means that an object is more likely to get an audio source or a particle effect from the object pool. So if you've got an important object, you can increase this priority. I'm just going to leave that at 0 for now. And now the second thing that we need to do is actually add some triggers so that the impact object knows when to play interactions and send interaction data to this material. And to do that, we're going to add a collision trigger component. So we go to Add Component, Impact, and we want to go to 3D collision triggers, and we're going to select this impact collision trigger 3D. We have a bunch of different impact collision triggers here, but we're going to go with this one since it's the general use one that you're going to be using most of the time. And so we have an impact object field, which just corresponds to our impact object rigid body. And this material composition checkbox is just a little bit extra detail that you can add by having blending of sounds playing, especially for terrains. So you can see here how there's a little bit of a blend between the hard and soft. If we check use material composition, you'll actually get a blend of the hard and soft sounds based on the blending of the textures. So that can be useful for a little extra nuance. I'm going to leave it off for now since we don't have that much blending here. And let's go ahead and test it out and see what we're working with. So let's go and pick this up. And as you can see here, it plays collision sounds when we hit against the terrain. But it plays the hard collision sounds when we're hitting against these blocks here and against this here. And that's because none of these objects here have any impact objects or impact materials assigned to them. So it's just using the fallback material that we set up to be hard. So now we need to actually set up the level objects to use impact objects and impact materials. So I'm going to start off by selecting these guys here, and I'm going to add an impact object component. And since these objects don't have rigid bodies, they're just static level geometry, I'm going to use impact object single material. And just the same as with the plastic, I drag the material I want onto there, and that's them all set up. So now we do the same thing for these right here. Go to impact object single material, and drag the soft material. And we don't need to set up any collision triggers for these since they are static and part of the level geometry. Triggers are only really useful for dynamic objects and some static level geometry based on your scenario. And for the terrain, we're going to be using a special impact object called an impact terrain. So let's go to add component, impact, and this time select impact terrain. And it already has our terrain field set up here. And we've got fields here for each of our terrain textures, just these two grid textures. And so for these, we're going to drag and drop our hard and soft materials. So for our green grid, we want the soft material. And for the dark gray, we want the hard material. So now with all that set up, let's see what happens. So we got the hard impacts here, and we got the soft impacts here. So everything is working as we expected. Now one last thing is that we aren't hearing any sliding sounds from this, and that's because we haven't set a slide and roll trigger on our little blue plastic container. So all we have to do to set that up is go to Impact, 3D Collision Triggers, and click on Slide and Roll Trigger. And it has the same properties here. We just drag and drop this guy. And we also have these additional properties, slide mode and roll mode. You can just set these to normal, which will mean it'll play slide sounds or roll sounds, or none, which means it won't play slide sounds or roll sounds. I'm going to set the roll mode to none since we don't even have any roll sound effects. So now, if we click play, if we get this guy to slide, yeah, you can hear it, we got some slide sound effects. And that does it for this getting started tutorial on the Impact Interaction System. I hope you all enjoyed, and I will see you in the next tutorial.